heat source heat pump.
Ground source heat pump.
Ground source heat pump. And I think we're standing right on it. Tell us everything that went in here.
Yoder Drilling did the drilling. There are 5 325-foot bores that go right under where we're standing.
Straight down.
Straight down. As you can see, there's still some saturation. Bob and Christine gained how many parking spaces?
All 1, 2, 3 right there. Easily 3 or 4 more.
So gain 3 parking spaces in the space where those loops went in. If you can see on the side of the building there's 2 lines real close to each other, insulated with some black foam insulation. Those come over, across, and down, and then tie in with those wells. Bob and Christine used to have 2 high-efficiency gas furnaces with relatively efficient air conditioners, but as they've been making changes to try to get more environmentally friendly, going with more solar generation, getting away from carbon sources, you purchase, I believe, wind power for the balance of the electricity you use. So by integrating geothermal, really their only carbon footprint essentially now comes from the wood-fired pizza oven. Yeah, and customers. Of course, that's completely renewable, and so they're completely carbon neutral as far as the Village Bakery. Yeah, that's a big step.
How big are these boreholes?
They're 2 3/4-inch pipes that go down and just simply tie together at the bottom. They're connected at the bottom just with a couple of 90s. It's basically just a long U-bend. They actually prefer to drill in rock. Rock's better, doesn't cave in. This was pretty tricky drilling. Ideally, you drill a hole, shove the pipes down, then you fill it with bentonite. That aids in the heat transfer. It's not like an open well, 2 pipes in the ground.
Water goes down one, up the other in the same hole.
They're ideally set up as a reverse return. As the water's coming down here, the first loop off, its return is the last one back on. So if these were the pairs of pipes going down like this, they return completely reverse of the way that they go down. Because if you do that and the pipes are all of relatively equal length, you get relatively even water flow through each of the loops.
So are these water streams exchanging heat with each other?
To and from the ground. Each well here is about 10 feet apart.
And how do you get the 90s in at the bottom?
Send a really small guy down. They're prefabricated on a roll. There's a couple different types. The way Yoder's does it, they just take 2 90s that are fused together. Kind of neat to watch. Basically a branding iron that heats up to a specific temperature. And you put the male and female ends on for a specified period of time. You got to use a counter to make sure it's right. And then you shove those 2 pipes together. And they're not glued or joined in that way, but they're actually fused together. They essentially become the same piece of pipe.
Copper pipe?
No, plastic.
Put a section down and then fuse another piece and section down, or is it just...
Their only joints are at the bottom.
It's coming off of a roll or something?
So you take the 2 rolls, you have the Fusion 90s on the end, and then you're feeding off of both rolls
So
as you're
somebody
feeding.
just pushing it in by hand?
Hopefully just by hand.
This is flexible then?
Yeah, it comes on a roll.
What do the temperatures look like in these pipes? Cold and comes back a little warmer, I assume.
You're somewhere in the low 50s. Even the supply flow, depending on how warm everything's been, you could get up into the lower 90s and clear down into around 15 degrees. How do you prevent freezing? There's a couple of different antifreeze solutions. Methanol is generally the safest one. Some people spec out propylene glycol, but methanol is a little bit preferred in my opinion.
What is the ground actually doing?
Water is an excellent heat sink. Take a pan from the stove and you stick it on the countertop. You're using the air to transfer the heat away from that pan. You can come back 10 minutes later and you probably wouldn't want to stick your hand down into the bottom of the pan because you know that it hasn't gotten rid of its heat that quickly. Versus you put it into a sink with about that much water in it and instantly it absorbs that heat. A similar idea is behind using water and then a solid mass like the earth as a heat transfer source rather than air as with a typical heat pump system. Ground temperatures stay a lot more stable than the air temperature. So you take a heat pump, its heat exchanger, into the place where it's the happiest and works the best. A standard electric resistance heater like a baseboard heater or the coils in a hair dryer or what's called a 1 COP. That's a coefficient of performance. So for every $1 of electricity you put in, you get $1 worth of heat out. A good air source heat pump, 47 degrees outside, is about a 4.5 or 4.7 COP. So you can see the dramatic increase in efficiency. For $1, you get $4.50 worth of heat out. As the temperature gets colder, that coefficient of performance drops off because there's not as much available heat in the air. Taking a system when it's 47 degrees outside that operates around a 4.6 COP, and by the time it's 17 degrees, it's maybe operating around 2.6, and by the time it reaches 5 degrees, it's maybe around 2. Now, it's still better than the electric resistance, but your need for heat went up, and then its ability to actually produce heat, BTUs, goes down. A geothermal is much more buffered against that type of problem because the ground temperature remains right around 55 degrees. I think our deeper temperature right here is around 57.
The COP drops as the season goes on.
It can drop slightly. A lot of that depends on usage and also how deep the wells are, because it depends on the return temperature of the water.
What is the COP for this system?
Across the course of the year, it's right around 4.
Okay.
There's electric resistance that typically comes in geothermals, as with any other heat pump system. That's going to drive up the coefficient of performance because you're not dragging the system efficiency down by periodically implementing one COP electric resistance sources.
Are they the first folks in Athens that have done something like this commercially?
The first business that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ground source heat pump schemes. There's a place that we do some work for. It's a giant assembly hall up west of Columbus, and when the geo crew was drilling the rig, the end of the rig fell off, and they drilled into an underground river. So they utilize what's called a pump and dump. So they take water, pump it up in and through their geothermals in the building. There's about 12 of them. And then they just dump that water back out. They are able to harvest and use some of it for certain other purposes, but primarily just dump it back into the ground from where it came. That water temperature is much more stable across the course of the year because you're not recycling the water as you are in with a typical closed loop system. Then some schools in our area do utilize it, like Miller or up by Corning. It's water loop. The same sort of idea here, same type of system, but rather than using the ground, they heat the water with either a boiler or cool it with a chiller. And they're keeping that water at the absolute ideal temperature for those units to operate at. So it's still a water-to-water exchange basis, but it's a water loop, and those are actually the most efficient. They call them geothermal still, but it's not at all a geothermal unit.
But it's still a heat pump, only you're
still a heat pump.
water to water.
It's a water-to-air heat pump.
If you had a big flat area, what would be wrong with just, instead of digging your pipes straight down, sort of just laying them out in like digging a 4-foot deep trench?
You can also utilize a pond.
Are there any trade-offs?
Typically, you're going to see your efficiency fall off because the ground temperature isn't as stable that close to the surface. Imagine how much more surface area of the ground you're utilizing by going down rather than staying 4 to 5 feet below the surface. It's a ton more mass of the earth that you're gaining. The chances of having something puncture are higher. Of course, there's some settling and some movement that's happened here. When you put those long trenches in, it takes a long time to get that ground. There's been some people in town here in Athens that have fought with that for years. The way their ground was, they'd never gotten it right.
The surface settles?
Yeah, due to surface settling and just stuff moving around. So we did a slinky design on one where you kind of take a roll, same type of plastic, and as you pull it out, you tie it. So it looks like a slink, and you can actually put it into a trench that you just cut. Those work well. The problem is there was a lot of spring that came out at the end of it. So the trench would fill up with water in the wintertime. In this past winter, with the extreme temperatures, we had some serious movement. Less risk of that if you're doing the vertical wells.
Would that movement rupture the pipe then?
The pipe doesn't care, but the bricks of the guy's patio heaved them to the point where the back door wouldn't open. Well, they took care of the spring, and it was filling up other areas. It actually had gotten back into the drainage system around the house, heaved other areas too. So potential drawbacks there are of having surface trench as opposed to vertical bore.
Are the excavation costs more for the drilling?
If you have your own backhoe, it's not bad. It's not a whole lot more to hire yoders if you're getting the tax credit. The village didn't have a choice of doing horizontal. It had to be vertical. If you're recouping 30% in the tax credit, there's some benefits to using a drilling company, and also like with yoders and a lot of other drilling companies, they'll warranty the piping system for 50 years.
10-foot optimal or?
The way that they run their program, further you are apart, the better, because it increases the mass in between. Further apart you move, you're adding a little bit to the cost, and there becomes a point where what you're gaining isn't really worth how far apart you're going.
There's a system in Maine. They did a greenhouse and did a geothermal for it. And put the solar panels up to run the whole thing. So your COP, if it was heat only, would be better. It's
only going to take into account how much electricity you're using as in comparison with electric resistance. COP is a coefficient of performance in the heating mode. A compressor always has a hot discharge. Just pretend a little coil wrapped around the discharge of that and steal a little bit of that heat. It's called a de-superheater. At geothermal systems, you can take some of that stolen heat, direct it toward supplementing the hot water, and it's a lot more efficient than just straight up electric resistance heat or propane gas heat. Take that and it actually increases your cooling capacity in the summertime because you're not just dumping the heat into the ground here, you're also taking some of that excess heat and dumping it into your hot water. So rather than just throwing away the heat that you've already had in the building, you're taking it and putting it somewhere where it's useful and is even lowering your impact. There is some substantial savings with that as well.
Is there a rule of thumb about the minimum distance between wells?
Depending on who you talk to, I've heard
Well, I'm talking to you.
10 to 12 feet.
Okay, all right.
And what about depth? When does the earth start getting warmer?
Not too far down, it starts becoming fairly reliable. They'll drill a 200-foot well per ton, depending on the ground. Here they opted, instead of doing 6 because of the spacing, to do 5 deeper wells. A lot of times they'll do a little bit deeper in a commercial setting, generally about 20 feet extra per ton for a commercial setting. Their building here is actually, it comes out as cooling dominant, which is odd. Generally it's heating dominant in our area, but because of the business and the generating heat inside and the customers and all that, it's actually more of a cooling dominant location. But let's say it was kept at 70 degrees all winter long. It's our hot, what would you say our hottest summertime temperature is?
Be 100.
Okay, let's say 100. So you got a 30 degree delta T between what you want it to be inside and what it is outside. What's our coldest winter temperature on average, not last year? 0 or 5 is typically what we size for around here. Because let's say it's 0. 70 degrees, the difference between what it is inside versus outside. Now typically inside you're going to have some things that generate heat, refrigerators, bodies. Regardless, you need a lot more BTUs typically around our area to heat than you do to cool.
You need to increase the cooling capacity when you're saying cooling dominant.
And why is this cooling down? Why is this different?
All the heat generating things that they have inside, the ovens, the stoves, the bodies.
The kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
right.
just-
You're essentially only heating the ends of the building
Yeah,
in the
the
wintertime. But in the summertime, most of that cooling is now trying to cool down where they're making all that heat, and you got the front door opening.
So you did a calculation of all these loads and size the system.
Yeah.
So that's part of the service that you guys, Air Clause,
Yeah.
does.
You can imagine the amount of heat energy that's absorbed through the solar panels. I mean, my guess is just between that, the awning on the front, you noticed a big change with the load.
You're saying they're insulating for the heat load or what?
The PV helps in the summertime,
Oh, because it's absorbing,
and it hurts in the wintertime. You're blocking the sun now in the wintertime.
oh, for insulation, I see.
Yeah.
And when it happens to be sunny.
The
I
net
gotcha.
result is very positive, though. The center section is basically generating its own heat after things get rolling during the day.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and take that heat energy and turn it into electricity. It's just the two ends we need to worry about kicking some heat out there.
What can you tell us about what you run into with the various strata between soil and stone and the variations in heat transfer? You do a core sample first to see what you got to deal with, then size the system based on that.
All that stuff comes from the USGS as far as what is under us, which is mostly reliable. One of the worst ones we ever did was, well, between Nelsonville and Logan, it was supposed to be 8 feet down that we'd hit rock, and it was 25 feet down through sand, and so it was a lot bigger job. They actually had to bring their bigger rig in to drill it. And the nice thing about them is they absorb all of that. If they give a quote, where here they were worried that they might actually run into making a lot of water. You know, you drill into the ground, sometimes you don't know what you're going to find. I'd say everybody here is probably aware that as much as people like to say that they know absolutely for certain what's going to happen when they sink something into the ground, but that's not the case.
The stone and the soil make up on heat transfer.
Stone's better. Yeah, but it also depends on the level of saturation. So as we were talking about water being a better heat transfer source, if we get into a dry situation, it doesn't work nearly as well as a wet. The thermal conductivity goes up when we get a little bit more moisture in the layers down below. Now this appears to be very wet. So you probably all see a heat pump and an air conditioner. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can't tell the difference between one without looking inside of it. Geothermal system does is it takes for a water to air heat pump. What it does is we take the compressor in the outside unit, put it in the inside unit, and then the rest of pretty much what's outside is just a coil that it does an air exchange of the heat. We take that coil, and that's what you're standing on here. It's just using water and the earth rather than refrigerant and the air. The refrigerant portion is all inside. There's another benefit of a water to air heat pump is the total refrigerant charge is much less. Now with our more environmentally friendly refrigerants like Puron, not that big a deal, but with other types of refrigerant that might not be as environmentally friendly, if there was a problem, you're not going to lose nearly as much into the atmosphere.
The units being on the inside, Christine and I were just talking just today about the noise pollution that's going to be saved. We won't have those compressors kicking on that are pretty loud, and it's just more pleasant for our neighbors and for us while we're doing our job. And the thing that we didn't even think of, one more benefit.
So how long did it take to do the whole thing, from start to finish, drilling or whatever, till
Yoda was here
completion?
2 days. Is that right?
They were here on a Monday and a Tuesday. I don't think you had to shut down at all that week, right? 2 weeks later, we came in and tore out what they had, and we were here for probably 3 days. You shut down for 1 day, though, right?
Just one.
And then Yoders came back to do their tie-in.
So about
So we took
6
their gas
days?
furnaces and air conditioners out. The system that was on this side, we tied it in over here as far as the ductwork went. And before they had 2 zones, but they zoned with equipment. They had an equipment that did this portion of the building and equipment that did that portion of the building. Now there's 3 zones, this section, the middle section, and the far end, that are all separately monitored and can have a damper system that pushes air wherever you need it.
And whose equipment did you put in?
Bryant, Carrier, and Bosch have all formed a collaborative partnership. They're working on some newer techs, DC, inverter, compressors, and geothermals. Even the pumps that move the water can be tied in via a DC system and a temperature sensing system so that to make sure that the flow is exactly what's needed. There's no electricity wasted.
On the average, you're pumping more heat into the ground than you're taking out every year. So that would seem to mean that year to year, you're going to be warming up a column of rocks down there. How long will that go on?
If you were to stick a thermometer down there, you wouldn't be able to tell it. You'll tell a change in our water temperature. You're not going to change the earth much as we go down. Closer to the surface you will, but the earth as a whole does a great job of moving heat around itself.
You know, I thought the whole point of the Earth was that once you're down deep enough, it's so far from the surface that it stays at whatever temperature it
Right,
is.
and the reason it does is because it's not exposed to the air, and you got
Right.
the whole mass of the entire Earth beneath you at that point. The whole Earth is moving and shifting heat around all the time.
So it's a little bit warmer in China.
Well,
No, it's going to even out. If you took a hot rod of some sort, put it down in the center of a lake, and went down, it's going to be warmer right close to that heating source, but it's going to dissipate throughout the whole system. Think about air source heat pumps. They're doing the exact same thing. But we don't significantly change the temperature of the winter for Earth, ground, mass, which does a lot better job of heat absorption than air does. I'm not a thermal conductivity expert of the ground. I do know from the classes that I've been to that when you go down, deep Earth temperature is very hard to change. I mean, you could be pumping billions of BTUs in or out and not change the Earth, deep Earth temperature that much.
How is this different on the inside? Do you have like a regular thermostat?
It's a programmable one, so you can do a lot with it. I'm here every day, so I don't have it programmed perfectly
Right.
yet. Just set each zone what temperature you want. It works just like any thermostat you would have at your home.
That's electric with what's called non-volatile memory. So if it loses power, when you regain power, it remembers everything that you had it set up.
Do you have any idea about performance yet? How much of your heating and water heating is this system producing?
I don't have the numbers for the geothermal yet, but I'm very pleased. We've been really, really happy with the system. Good cold spell in early November, just a couple weeks ago. 17 degrees at nighttime. Because it's a newer system, it's not like instant heat, but I was really surprised at how fast it did kick on. It was a half hour before I needed it. I was experiencing good temperatures and really recovered very well.
Have you figured your payback time?
The financial payback?
Their motive was not money savings here. Gas is one of the least expensive sources still. My guess is you could purchase electricity less expensive than the wind power too. So that plays into it as well. So when you're comparing current natural gas prices for wind-generated power, when we wrote the grant, I don't think we could include, I don't remember if we could factor in how much PV was being generated. That's all through the market. The gas prices went down to a penny
Yeah, and electricity is going to double in the next 14 years.
There's a payback at some point, and the reason I'm being a little hedgy on that is it depends on where you get your source from. So if you're getting your electricity here, you're most likely getting it, and you're not purchasing any other kind of electricity, you're most likely getting it from a coal-fired power plant. And so if you're comparing a coal-fired power plant, or even a natural gas power plant to a natural gas furnace that's high efficiency, let's say it's a natural gas power plant, which is better than a coal-fired one. Let's say they're running at 60% efficiency to make that electricity, and then you're using it to generate electricity, heat with electricity here. The ultimate original source was that of something that's dumping huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, versus if you use wind power to power a gas furnace that's here on site, your plant generation is here, and you can get as high as 98.2% efficiency out of that. So it's a lot better than generating power far away with a natural gas plant. You're doing it right here on site at a much higher efficiency rate. The reason I'm being hedgy is because there's a lot of moving pieces. Here you've got wind, PV, and ground source. You're pretty much got everything to the highest efficiency that you can as far as those things go.
How much of the loss of efficiency is due to transmission losses from the remote power plant?
I can answer that. It's as high as about 50%. You lose about half of everything that comes from the power plant before it
In
gets out to the end
transmission
user.
losses.
So that would cut your 60%
50%.
efficiency down to about a 30% efficiency.
Yeah.
Coal burners are in the 40s.
So terrible.
Do they have any backup for space heating and hot water heating?
The way you set up the water heating, there's an A and a B part to the answer to that question. The A to the heating is no. There's no backup.
Space heating.
There's no space heating
It's
backup.
totally it's a ground source.
Only ground source. Yeah.
Because air-to-air heat pumps don't always have a electric backup.
Correct.
There's no electric backup.
No, there can be.
Got solar stuff.
We elected not to install that.
You say just turn the stove on, they'll be hot.
That's the idea. And then in extreme temperatures, like last year when it was negative 20, I don't think you were open, right?
Yeah, that's what we were saying, is that we're expecting on the very, 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 very cold polar vortex kind of days that we might just scale back and not have that added heat that's generated only once or twice or 3 times. That we are more concerned about cooling our bakery through the summer months. That is going to be the real test.
If you're coming in to the bakery, it's cold outside, you're going to be bundled up. You don't want it to be really warm right there in the center of the building because you're roast. Now, if you're sitting down with your jacket off on either end of the building, you want to be comfortable. Businesses, especially like this, cater to more people who are inside already and satisfying their comfort needs versus the customer's comfort needs, which especially in the wintertime, you could have your thermostat set much lower, saving energy, saving money, and making your customers more comfortable. Okay. We're going to use 55 degrees water temperature coming into your building. So when you open up the tap of your cold water, you got 55 degree water essentially flowing in from the exterior. Well, if you open up the hot tap, you're getting hot water out, but 55 degree water is now being added to the hot water tank. The idea of the de-superheater is we put in a separate hot water storage tank. So water from the municipal source goes to that storage tank, then after it leaves that storage tank goes to a regular hot water heater. But the idea is if you can make that water any warmer than 55 degrees, you're saving energy. These come with a setting where you can set it up to 150 degrees. You have to put a tempering valve on if you do that. Especially in certain residences, about 60% of their hot water comes from the de-superheater portion of the geo. You can't rely upon the geothermal for all of your hot water needs. For instance, if it's a moderate time of the year, you're not going to be making any hot water. And so you just wouldn't have any hot water at that point.
Could they have heated their floors with this?
Yeah, we have a customer, Jeff Greenfield, who owns Third Sun. We put one in his house. It does radiant floor and it does air. Those systems become a little bit more complicated. You have to choose what you're doing with the water. That becomes a water-to-water geothermal rather than a water-to-air. Say geothermal heat pump. So reverse return is used a lot in a lot of piping systems, including radiant boiler systems, steam systems, a lot of times with hot water too. And the reason why is, look, let's say you have your piping coming across here, and it goes down a well, 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 and back. You'd be utilizing all of that surface area, right? Makes pretty good sense.
With the square root of the time,
I was going to just ask if you happen to know the roof angles.
No.
Okay. I'll measure it.
Yeah. And I think the first thing to explain is what we have done. And because the percentage is confusing as far as like what percentage of those, of how many watts we use. As a commercial bakery, and I'll talk mostly about next door, we transitioned that bakery out of gas completely in 2 phases. The first phase was the kitchen, but our business used in 2010 90,991 watts. A very large portion. That probably can take care of how many tiny houses? 90K. 90,000 watts.
90,000
Kilowatt hours.
Yeah, okay.
Over a year. It's quite a big chunk. So when we were putting in 20,000 kilowatt hours onto our roof, that would only take out or less than 25%. What we ended up really wanting to do was to really reduce all of our energy needs and all of our fossil fuel needs. Stop using our gas cooking, and that increased our electric use greatly because we had to, instead of using a 6-burner gas and 2 convection oven heated with gas, we transitioned all of that kitchen over to electric, and that greatly shot up our energy use. But with our energy program of buying LED lights all over there next door, reducing all of our compressors, we have so many refrigeration compressors, we reduce the refrigeration electric needs by buying Energy Star appliances, which is 25% of the energy that it used to. In other words, I can replace one old refrigerator with a new refrigerator, same space, same unit, looks almost identical, but the newer one is 25% of the electricity needs.
So 75% reduced. The funny thing is, you can buy the same unit today. It's not like they took away those totally inefficient ones. They're still selling the really inefficient ones. So you have to really do some research to find out which ones are efficient. Most restaurants are probably still buying the super inefficient.
Energy Star label stuck on the door isn't enough.
It's a helpful guide, but
They do a really good job. I'm promoting Energy Star.
Yeah, okay.
Every Energy Star, every time it's issued, every year, some of the units lose that Energy Star because of the efficiencies that can be coming in. So the technology has changed greatly. So all of the commercial refrigeration energy saving possibilities are growing every year. I'm seeing smaller and smaller compressors. I'm seeing more efficient design.
Is there a hot vent?
I have looked into a lot of that. The problem that I've come into with that is that you need an exhaust. As the hood pulls your heating or cooling out, electric appliance sends out a certain amount of electromagnetic radiation. Those are specifically designed to do that, and it's off the charts when you do a reading on it. So I don't
think it has to be a health hazard?
Yes, I think it could very well be a health hazard.
Just in a household use? Should you stand back from it when it's on? Or?
Yeah.
Don't microwaves do the same thing?
Yeah, but I don't use a microwave.
You're saying you're using 90K a year?
Yes.
90 kilowatt hours?
In 2010, before we had solar panels, we've been doing compact fluorescence. Before we did a lot of energy purchasing, we were spending 90,000 a year to run the bakery.
You were using 90K kilowatt hours
per year to run the bakery.
But if you're producing 20,000 on your roof,
Probably 90,000 kilowatt hours a year, which works out to, what is it, 750, 7,000 500 kilowatt hours per month, right?
Yeah.
I've done that. So that works out to like about 10 times as much as a residence.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
That's correct. Each system produces 10K. It's called a 10K system.
Oh, you're talking per year
That's
on
what-
your solar system.
The system itself is a 10K system. I have two 10K systems, but they actually perform more like 11 or 12K systems.
How many panels have you got? There's the question.
About 60.
60, and they're what? They're 250 watt panels?
280 and 280s and 340s.
Okay, those are your numbers.
I think the confusion is coming in where there's 90,000 kilowatt hours a year that are used. And those are 20K panels, correct? So 20K as opposed to 90,000K.
Oh, 90,000K, okay, I thought you said 90K.
You probably
A
did.
year.
We're not very good at using our
Yeah,
case.
90,000K. So you're using 9 million watt hours a year.
Thousand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said 90K, so what you meant was
90K
90,000
kilowatt
K.
hours.
90KK.
Yeah, 90K, right.
And if you save 30K, you're going to save $1,800 based on 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That ain't hay.
And then you also have transmission and other things. The net costs are right around 11 cents.
Right.
By the time you put in all the other, I think the question asked earlier, Bob answered correctly with generation service, what generation service costs. But a lot of the other costs are eaten up based upon meter usage, based upon transmission and other tariffs and other things that get figured in. So, but residents is generally about 11, somewhere between 9 and 14 cents in our area generally.
And when we were able to get rid of the gas, we had been, ever since we could, we had not been using gas next door for heat. And Bob had turned off the hot water in the restroom.
Well, it wasn't working.
So we didn't even use any gas, but we were still getting a bill for, wasn't it at least $30 a month, so there's that. So now, no gas over there, and there's hot water in the bathroom because it's the geothermal preheat water, right?
And where are you getting the rise from that 55 degree to what you would normally consider a usable temperature in the bathroom, let's say 110, 115 degrees?
If the system is running and the kitchen hasn't taken or replaced that hot water in the bathroom that comes just from the geothermal is really hot. It actually is.
So I think it's set right around 125.
Does it come out the tap that hot?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not scalding hot.
I have a blender.
Oh, a combiner.
That expression tempering valve, what that does what Bob's talking about. You can either do it at the tank or you can do it at the tap. And that makes it sure that the water coming out of the tap isn't scalding. It blends it with cold water.
What do you use for cooking now over there? Just a regular gas range, but not an induction one, or?
No gas.
Right,
gas.
no
Just
gas.
electric,
Just electric, a
yeah,
regular
individual
gas.
Electric range.
Yeah, that's really where all this electricity is needed. Where I have 3 1,500 watt hobs and then 4 other 800 and 900 watt hobs, and they're constantly running, plus an electric heavy duty commercial convection oven that's just using electricity to heat. It's an enormous amount of electricity.
But we used to have 3 gas ovens, one big
Yeah.
gas oven over here and 2 next door that we used for our baking. And when we had Chris Fox build our wood-fired oven here, now we do all that baking, the bread baking and a lot of the pastry and quiche baking in this oven with the retained heat. So we can bake for hours on that one load of wood.
We do clafouti and pastries this morning for brunch.
Even though the last firing was
last fire
Friday
on
night.
Really?
Yeah, so, and there's more, we can get more out of that oven. It could be a village oven. People can
Yes.
bring their food here and we could bake in it.
So is that oven based on a rocket stove kind of concept, or?
Oh, I was talking about rocket stoves. I love rocket stoves. The rocket stove just has a more intense heat that completely burns or burns more of the gas and particulates. So there's less particulate and more intense heat with less fuel. This oven also creates that convection. It's like a big dome, a really long oven, brick, lots of mass. And as it burns deep and then rolls over. You can actually see the combustion and the intensity of the fire that burns completely the fuel, and then as it exits, it's low emission, low particulate emission.
Isn't temperature control a problem with fire oven?
You use time for temperature control.
Time.
Oh,
And location in the oven.
okay.
It's a little more tricky during pizza night, but when you have to have the oven temperature correct. But it works pretty efficiently. You start to understand.
Is all your electric served by your solar panels?
No, it's approximately 25% right now of our electric needs are met with solar. The rest is just off the grid. You can buy wind, we buy wind.
But the efficiency of the geothermal system also has reduced our energy use a lot.
One quick thing about the wind energy, we used to be talking about Pear Energy. We used to buy it from Pear, who buys wind power. It's like a supplier. But right now you're going to look for Arcadia, because just this last month they've consolidated with a
So what
company
happened
called
to
Arcadia.
Pear? I've been buying from Pear for a while.
Arcadia.
And they gave me the option of going back to AEP or getting it from Arcadia.
Arcadia.
So I shipped it to Arcadia.
Yeah.
But Pear went out of business.
I think that was the case, that they were a startup just like a few other of those companies, like
Okay.
Arcadia, and Pear didn't make it. And I think Arcadia they partnered, they kind of sold or conglomerated, they got eaten up by Pear, or by Arcadia.
Okay, so a year and a half from now, somebody's going to replace Arcadia?
It's possible, I don't know.
Well, it probably has something to do with the regulatory changes, like in Ohio, where we lost our progressive regulations that were encouraging renewable energy and energy efficiency. So there were less incentive for people to get renewable energy, where you get your SRECs, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I think that's how those companies make money, is by...
But the oil companies own Governor Kasich. The oil and gas own our governor.
Agreed.
So we wanted to spend a little time today discussing future plans, some ideas.
For the last couple of years, what we've been focusing on is going to people's houses who have done innovative energy stuff, which is great. I mean, I think everybody's learning a lot about it. But when we first actually talked about this with William Beal, because this was like a Sierra Club meeting that we had, and we were just talking with him about what his idea, because it was really kind of his idea. He just wanted to have a group of people getting together and learning from each other, brainstorming how to do innovative stuff. Now, he's got people working for him now who are doing that, which is great, because we go there and we get to see what they're doing, and that's great. There are some of us who would like to be learning in a hands-on manner, so that if we had projects that people wanted to do, people who were interested could get together and actually work together on those projects. It's great to learn about this in a cerebral manner, but in terms of actually getting in there and starting to figure out how to take your place and put this innovation in your place. It's, I think, good to have a lot of different people with more expertise or with overlapping expertise. The homeowner is the one who buys all the materials. Other people are willing to chip in and do some work on it.
We need specific ideas.
Are people interested in doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What's our first project?
The Athens Renewable Energy Consumer Co-op is the focus of my activities. We have a pretty fair fund of knowledge of photovoltaic technology. We have almost no knowledge of geothermal technology. I'll raise this at the next board meeting.
Take things like geothermal, you hire the expert to do it.
Right.
Nobody's gonna go out there and drill their own holes. We gotta think about things that we can do, other
Yes.
than hire the expert and do it for us.
So these are some of the ideas that I was thinking of. In
That's what we
insulation,
need,
you know,
specific ideas.
learning how to do foamed insulation, possibly doing the outside of this building, building rocket stoves. I mean, I would love to have a rocket stove. I'd certainly be getting the stuff together. If somebody wanted to help me learn how to build a rocket stove, that would be great.
Dana wants a rocket stove.
Yeah,
She consults with Dennis and what materials she needs. She assembles the materials, and then we invite the group to come to her house.
Do a barn raising.
And I don't know if we can actually help build a rocket stove. We can stand there and watch anyway, get an idea how it's done.
No, I think a lot of it is manual labor. I think mostly what you need is cob, basically cob
Okay,
material.
just mixing up mud.
Yeah, mixing up mud.
There's actually something people can do. Any other ideas?
My idea is the most simple thing to reach people is solar lights. I've had a terrible time with bad solar lights, and there's a lot to it, but I've gone through 3 or 4 iterations, and I'm still trying to get mine to go. What to look for on your driveway, so you don't have to run electric.
Oh, your little runway
Very
lights keep
simple
going out.
for the person in the street. That is a way of getting into renewables. The ones that you buy at the stores don't work.
You have to keep tweaking them. You get in there and you rotate the battery around because you
I've
get.
done many things, but I think I finally got, you have to go to Radio Shack and get
There's a special
special
battery that
batteries.
goes in the solar lights. You just can't put a regular battery
Right.
in that.
Eventually, what you're gonna get is some oxidation going on there.
On
You
the
get
end
bad
of it.
contacts.
Well, they've never worked. I threw away the batteries that came with them, replaced them with rechargeable. They don't work. I have them in full sun. They still don't work. So Radio Shack has ion.
Which the contacts do get filled more.
Yeah, well, these haven't even had a
Get
chance to do that
oxidated.
because
Yes.
they're new. It's just very frustrating, and it can turn people off of the whole idea. There's nothing on a package that tells you these are really bad, they will not work. There's nothing on the package that says that.
Contact points, then putting a little grease on there before you put it in. Keep the moist air from getting.
The ones that she's talking about didn't work when they were brand
Day
new.
one. They worked for maybe one night.
And you really should have those because a lot of people have been introduced to solar energy by such a simple device because it's miraculous. It sits there
It's wonderful.
and it collects the sun and it gives you light.
There's no way I'm going to spend several $1,000s to put photovoltaic cells on my roof when they can't make it work for $10.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fix your solar lights.
It's
Well, I've got 2 consultants.
A little hoop house so they can grow vegetables in it.
Yes, yes.
I built several, I can be the advisor,
Yeah.
tell you what materials to get. And when the materials are ready, then we will go to that person's house and build a hoop house. That's something that we could do, us amateurs. But it would take somebody who wants to do it, because I've already built mine. A hoop house.
H-O-O-P. Oh, okay.
If anybody seriously is interested in building a hoop house to grow vegetables in the winter, let me know.
It's hot. Still hot.
So where's your reburner?
Where's my what?
Your afterburner thing for burning up.
It's a closed oven, and so when I was making that comparison for the rocket stove, how the rocket stove intensifies,
Oh, okay.
it does the same thing. It's as the convection, the airflow goes in underneath, and then it circulates upward. And by the time it comes out, it's being burned several different times with the flames.
So you're feeding it down here.
No, the wood's everything's inside.
So you get the grass clipped in.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
ash pit is underneath. Yeah, it's a closed oven. It's completely closed.
What's this here?
That's where the ashes, you rake the ashes out.
Out and go, they go down in there.
Yeah, there's nothing on the outside. Underneath it. Two cubbies.
So do you start the fire up front here and then shove it in the back?
No, you load the wood in and then light it and walk away. Yeah.
It's too easy.
It is. It is the best.
Yeah, we have a
most
shed.
Se va escuchando allá a lo lejos su clamiche bajo al mundo embrujo y tiempo libre con gran respeto lo recordamos con mucha emoción. Su tiempo con su preludios y un español allá a nosotros con esta música y uno regale con ánimo. Dice, mira, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, yeah. ¡Qué rico! Very good, very good. Now, ay, pégate, pégate, no te me conmigo. Voy caminando, voy caminando. La buena sí, la buena.